So you've talked about the secret to making a good documentary being finding a good character. What drew you to Amy Winehouse?
It's funny, I've made 2 features now, and both of them, weirdly enough, came to me. I did a film called Senna previously, and someone had contacted me, and I'm a big sport fan. So that film was like interesting to me because I wanted to get into the psychology of like a supreme sports person. After that, I didn't want to do any more sports films because a lot of people, sportsmen, contacted me directly saying, we really like that film, will you make a film about me? I was like, I don't want to do that, kind of repeating yourself. And then with Amy, I'm a North Londoner. I'm a Londoner. I live very close to Camden. I used to walk through there every day. When I got a call from my producer on Senna, James Gay Reese, he said, look, I've been offered this opportunity by Universal Music. They're saying, would you be interested in making a film about Amy Winehouse? He said, what do you think? And I thought about it. So I knew she was a good singer. I knew about the music. I had the records. She was a local girl. There's something about that. But there were a lot of questions. Really, I think for a good subject, you need questions that you want to answer. For me, I didn't really understand why the ending happened. How did it transpire that she was on stage in that state? Why did no one stop it? What was going on? Why was this long, drawn-out thing going on? I wasn't particularly shocked when I heard that she died. It was like it was going that way.
We kind of saw that.
Yeah, everyone did, and yet nobody stopped it. So there was that element, and then I just had a gut instinct that this film said something about my city, where I live, the area that I live, the city, and the world we live in now, that we were all somehow seemed a part of this. It was an instinct, really. And then you just have to have enough questions that you want to answer, and then we start the research process.
So that was your connection to it. This is a London story, and this is there's a curiosity about what is it about people that we don't intervene.
She's a London girl. She's a local girl. She's an ordinary girl. There was something about it. She was like, just someone up the road.
Yeah.
But you're right. The ending didn't make sense to me.
Do you remember where you were when you first heard an Amy Winehouse track?
I think I first heard her music. There's a TV show called Later with Jules Holland, which is a great show. All live musicians come on there. He's got an amazing kind of very eclectic kind of mixture of artists who come on. So it's a BBC TV show. And it's been going for a long time. Jules plays with them. And I've got a feeling the first time I became aware of her is this girl on there that looked unusual just with this voice. And I think it must have been Frank. And I'm pretty sure I remember her being on there singing Rehab, I think, for the first time when Back to Black came out. She was a guest on that show quite a few times.
And you said her look struck you, again, as an ordinary girl kind of thing?
Well, I think she already had, but she kind of ordinary but different, you know, her own style. I think that was the thing that was apparent. I think that's the thing that I like about London is that kind of everyone looks a bit different. You can be like whatever you want to be like. And Camden definitely has that kind of thing. And she was like one of the first girls that had this kind of vintage clothing thing going on very early on, you know, dressing up in old-fashioned dresses. And this is pre-Beehive and all of that. This is way earlier than all of that. And I think she was quite an inspiration to lots of girls. And funnily enough, when the project did come to me, my wife was like, you really have to do this. You really have to do this film. Of all the films that you kind of talk about, there was just something that says a lot to young women about Amy. And what was interesting is as you went through it, you realise the person that we kind of thought we knew Amy in the last few years, the real person, the person from the early years seemed so different. So full of life, so much energy. That first
girl you saw on the Jules Holland, that first performance.
Yeah, but at that point, I hadn't heard her speak. You know, you just see her perform.
From a storytelling perspective, we know how this story ends. So what were you trying to draw out with this doc?
You know, I do drama as well. And funny enough, with both documentaries that I did with Senna and Amy, both of the lead characters died young. Right, so you kind of have this a given. Certain countries people knew about Senna, other places in the US particularly they didn't. I don't know, Canada some people know. Amy, everyone knows the ending. So weirdly enough, it kind of frees you up because the story is actually the journey. The interesting bit of life is how you get to where you're going. It's not where you ended up. And so the film becomes about unraveling who she was, what inspired her, why did she write the songs, why was she in that situation, what drew her to, you know, get in with that particular guy and why did she marry him, and then, you know, all of that was interesting. That's what the story's about. It's about going backwards from the ending to figure out what takes you to that point.
And what did you uncover about why her life kind of went out of control so quickly?
I don't know if it is quickly, unfortunately. It's slow. It's really long and slow. And all of the clues are there. So when you see the film, you know, you realize from a very young age there are issues. There are, you know, in one way she's really shy. In another way she's a show-off. And in one way, you know, she wants the attention. Other times she's really terrified by being famous. There are issues with eating disorders. There are issues with kind of alcohol from a young age and kind of smoking cannabis and things. But then also you've got this lightness and humor, and she's got friends. She's joking around. You like her, actually. You really like her. You meet the young girl, you think she's great. But there's, in the background, there's all of these kind of things that she's just suppressing, or she's finding a way to somehow take the negative and turn it into something positive by writing and creating a song. And for her, it's like taking a bad situation and making it good by turning it into a piece of music. That was her escape. And she had it all under control. What happens is, as she goes along, she becomes more famous. Back to Black becomes huge. She can't control it anymore. It's out there. It's controlling her, really.
Those two rises seem parallel, the rise of her fame and also her dependence on alcohol and drugs. Yeah,
and kind of who it draws around her. You know, people come to her suddenly, and I think it kind of makes her unsure of where she is and whether she can trust people. So it all happens, it's always been there, but one particular relationship, that this guy called Blake, that she meets, and it all kind of suddenly explodes. But at the same time, you know, she meets this guy, she falls in love with him.
That's
and then
her
he
first husband, her. Blake, yeah.
Yeah, he leaves her and she has a breakdown. And that's the thing that happens. And then she goes and starts drinking heavily. And her friends feel like she's in trouble, she needs help. And they try to seek help. And for whatever reason, the people around her feel like she doesn't need help. So it's never really dealt with at an early stage before she's famous, before she's a huge international star. Later on, that actual incident, Amy turns into a song called Rehab. And so what the film does is it shows you moments in her life which then later on develop into a song that we all know, but we never really looked carefully at what the song was about or the lyrics.
We'll get into all of that in our complicity, and I want to revisit that particular song when we talk about her complicity. But you spoke to all these people, her ex-husband, and I've read you say that gaining these people's trust was your biggest job as a director. How did you do it?
I just talked to people. So really, I didn't know the story. I went in here not having any particular idea, no agenda, literally a blank piece of paper. There's no script. There's no expert that I could go to say, tell me what happened here. So we have this character. The first thing you need to have if you're going to make a film about musicians, you need a music, you need a publishing, you need the estate on board. And we knew how it ended. And then one by one, I just thought, okay, who are the people in her life? Let's just make a long list and one by one go through them. And really the first person that kind of opened the door was her first manager, Nick Szymanski. He was like a mate. He was only a couple of years older than her. And he was an A&R guy who kind of ended up becoming a kind of pseudo manager. And Nick, interestingly enough, Nick had seen my previous film, Senna, had liked it and had said, walking out of the cinema, you know, wouldn't it be great if one day someone made a film like that about Amy? A year later, I call him up. And he says, I'm really annoyed that you're calling me. One, because I really like the film, but two, because this is too soon and I don't want anyone making the film. It's too painful still. But I just said, let's just meet for a coffee. And we met and we started to talk. And I think once we started to talk, he kind of understood where I was coming from. I invited him into the edit suite where we were working. Just a few of us in a room, kind of ordinary people. It's not a big studio film or anything. On the wall, we had lots of Post-it notes and pieces of paper of just trying to work out who was who, trying to figure out the story. And like Nick only recently told me that was really a key point for him because it looked like we'd put in the work. It was like, you know, a bad cop movie. You know, we have a motel room with all the lines drawn over here and everything, trying to connect up who did what. Well, it was exactly that kind of thing, a visual reference to the story. And he said no one's ever connected the dots before. And he could tell that already, without knowing anything, we'd done more work than anyone had written about Amy previously. So he started to talk, and once he started to talk, he couldn't stop because he had so much to get off his chest. And that was a common thing you found with a lot of these people, right? Yeah, it was exactly what we're doing now. We'd been in a sound room, there'd be a microphone, it'd just be the two of us, and we would just start talking. And it's like, whatever you want to talk about, let's start at the beginning. And Nick would open up and tell us about his experience with Amy. And then he'd say, you've got to talk to these two people. And he'd say, you've got to talk to Juliet and Lauren, her best friends. I'd talk to them. They'd recommend somebody else. And bit by bit, word spread. And, you know, it took a couple of years to do this. Then slowly, if they trusted me enough, they'd say, you know, when I originally said I didn't have any footage, I have these photographs, I have these home videos, I have this answer phone message. You know, everyone had a little memento, which was very personal to them. And they trusted me enough to let me have a look at it. And I would say, look, if I use it, I'd have to get your permission. So right now, I'm just looking at stuff. And that's really how it worked. The trust went a long way.
And what did you discover about the role that the people around her played in her downfall?
I wouldn't say that not everybody played a part in the downfall. I mean, what happened was they were all friends. They were around her. They could see it happening. I mean, she played a part in her own story. You know, she was key. She fell in love with a certain person. She wanted to be like a certain person. She made a lot of decisions. But what happens is as things get more and more complex and she gets more and more famous, I think the fame just got so big and like, you're on a particular mission. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep promoting this record because it's huge. It's like one of the biggest records in the world. You don't stop touring at that point. And that's what happened. It was like a lot of performances, a lot of shows, just kind of milk it while it's good. And somewhere along the way, other things start happening, like her grandmother dies and, you know, just personal things are going on, which then start to get to the point where it feels like people are making decisions which are just blatantly not necessarily the best for Amy anymore.
But there does seem to be these pivotal moments, like her ex-husband gets her into crack cocaine. Her father chooses not to take her to rehab, as we all know in the song. There does seem to be these pivotal moments.
There are a lot of them. That's the thing. There are a lot of those moments. There are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of pivotal moments which happen, and then they just add on top of the last one and the last one. Because right from the beginning, you know, we learned from her mother that she had bulimia at a very young age. You know, we know that she's got a drink problem. We know that she tells us she's got depression. So there's all of these things that are already lying latent that she's somehow managing. Nick would say she'd talk about having kind of dark periods, like literally having to go and sit on her own somewhere because she had like a mood or a darkness about her. There are issues to do with self-esteem. Whenever you see her, even when she's happy in the earlier years and she's talking to herself on camera, every time she sees herself, she'll comment on, oh, I look ugly, I look terrible, I look hideous. You know, there's just an issue about the way she saw herself. That's already there long before she meets this guy, Blake, long before everything else starts to happen. It just multiplies and multiplies, multiplies.
Did you feel like you got a glimpse into how these things happen generally? Because there are Amy Winehouses in everyone's life, right? Yeah. And we let these little cues slip by us and we enable in these small ways. Did you feel like you got a glimpse into that?
Yeah, I think what you find is it's really complicated. You know, it's not like a bad movie that just says, oh, that's the turning point in their life. If only we could rewind that. Well, actually, it's everything that happens. And everyone that she's dealing with has obviously got their own personal experiences and it all just comes together. I think in Amy's case, it's really, the more I think about it, it's like a question of bad timing. You've got her personal experience growing up and what happened between her parents and, you know, whether people are around or not. Then you've got Blake's personal experience. He had a troubled childhood. They meet. They have a lot in common. Now they've got, you know, she's got a hit record. No one's saying no to her. Then you've got what's going on in terms of the media at that point. It suddenly has gone digital. So what's happening is that there are lots of camera people with digital cameras hanging around outside the door because the newspapers are having a battle in England and 2 different media organisations, and they've gone digital. They want more information every day to update the website. People are now seeing it all online. It wasn't like you have to buy a physical paper anymore. You can click on a page online. Oh, look, I can see her concert in Serbia. Everyone saw that footage. Very few people were there, but everyone's seen it. And then people are sharing it, commenting on it. Comedians, it's an easy gag. So what happens is it kind of opens up and opens up and opens up just at the point when everyone seems to have a thing to say about Amy. Very few people ever really met her or spoke to her, and it all adds up. And she herself seemed to be viewing all of this. She was taking all that negativity in as well.
That added layer of digital media exploding is an interesting one. Definitely complicates the story. Amy Winehouse's dad, Mitch Winehouse, he doesn't come across great in the film. You suggest he took advantage of his daughter's success at points. What did you see there?
I think, you know, if you watch the film, the way the film's constructed, like I said before, we've talked to 100 people, spoke to a lot of people, and a lot of people told us what was going on. And our job is then to cross-reference what everyone says with different people. So we get more than one person saying something, only then can it be in the movie. And then we look at the footage and we show what's going on. So the film's visually made entirely out of archive. So as I said, Amy's not well. We've a lot of performances where she's on stage. She looks really messed up and troubled and in a bad way. And at that point, people around her were making decisions to do TV shows about her or selling stories or whatever, just kind of keeping her in the limelight when she's trying to escape. Now, those decisions were made by people. Someone is also getting her out on tour when you don't think she should be on stage, you know, because there's a lot of money at stake. Tickets have been sold, so you've got to do the show. And whatever the pressures are, you know,
we can all understand.
We can all understand, but I think it just kept adding up and adding up and adding up. It was making her worse and worse and worse. Now, in hindsight, I'm hoping people will look at it and say, maybe we didn't do the right thing. Maybe that wasn't the best thing for her. But what's most important for me is I set out to make a film about Amy. The film's called Amy, and it's not about anyone else. And I think that's one of the other things that people kind of sometimes find a bit tricky. It's not about them. It's about her and what was best for her. And at that point, my feeling and everything that I found in the research, those TV shows, those tours didn't appear to be the best for Amy. And so I had to put them in a film. She was very straight. She was very honest. She was forthright with her opinions when she was speaking, which is really the earlier part of her life. And my producer and I looked at each other and said, look, if we're going to make this film, are we going to make this film? We know we're going to be causing a bit of trouble. Do you want to make this film? Because either we do it properly, we just don't do it at all. But it's going to be really bad if we make that kind of whitewash. Everyone loved each other. Everyone's great. Yeah. We all know the ending. We saw it. So when I was asked to make the film at the beginning, we all had the conversation, man to man, face to face, saying, we all know how it ended. This is not a happy story. We're going to have to do the real story. You do understand. You're going to let me speak to everyone. You're not going to stop me talking to anyone. And we're like, yeah, fine. I'm going to talk to her husband. I'm going to talk to everyone. It's like, yeah. So that's the film we've made. You know, I felt like we had to be honest to Amy.
And you were prepared for those criticisms. Like Mitch Winehouse has been critical of the film, and you had to be prepared for that.
Yeah, because you realise that people are not going to be happy with certain things that are in the film, but those things were done by those certain people.
Now, earlier I mentioned this doc explores our complicity in Amy's downfall. The lyrics are used a lot in this film. The lyrics for Rehab in particular, you mentioned earlier. This is a song we all partied to. It was a massive hit song, and it's a detailed story of a pivotal moment in her life that could have changed her life for the better, could have saved her life. Why did you want to reveal that?
Wow, it's just one of those things where, again, following the conversations and the research, I find myself sitting in a room talking to Nick going, oh, that song's about you. You're that guy that tried to... Actually, there was an incident where he tried to take her to rehab, and she then said, I'll go if, my dad thinks I need to go. And then she talks to her dad, and that all happened. Stronger Than Me is based on a real guy that she's like, I need you to be stronger than me. And that is like sums up a chunk of her life. Love Is a Losing Game kind of sums up, sadly, her whole life. What Is It About Men, she wrote really early on. It's like, it's all there. It's like suddenly you do a bit of homework and you go, every single song is telling me it's like another chapter in her life. And some of these songs were written at 16. Her first album was written at 16, 17, 18. And it's all there. She kind of almost knows where her life's heading at that age. Then she has a relationship with Blake and a few other relationships, and she writes those songs. And all of those songs kind of add up to, like, it's almost like Amy knew what was going on. She was able to express it through lyrics, and then it became a song. But then when it became a song, it becomes something else. And, we just weren't paying attention.
And in terms of our complicity, we were raising a glass to it, right?
It's, the irony is it's not funny, is it? We, not only that, people were dancing and making her sing the song, which really, for me, when you look at it now, it's like a massive cry for help. Put out their neon sign saying, when I say no, 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 I mean yes, 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 but if you really care about me, you'll stop it.
Is that what you meant when you said this stuff, this footage that you watched made you feel angry?
Once you know what's really going on and you understand that a lot of people knew what was really going on, okay, we can give ourselves a bit of an excuse. Like, particularly in North America, you kind of became aware of Amy fairly late in the day. Really, it was Back to Black, whereas a lot of people in England kind of knew of the girl beforehand, or we heard about her, she was in the news, and then this record changed her because it was a different style. You kind of look at it and you're going, yeah, I don't really understand. She's in Camden. People I know bumped into her. People stepped over in the street. She was going to like, just stop it. When you work backwards and you get built up to that point, you realise there was a lot of moments when people could have helped her. A lot of people could have stopped it. And they didn't, and then we didn't stop clicking. We didn't stop sharing it. We didn't stop commenting. I've met a lot of people, journalists, who did stories on her, who now feel guilty. I've spoken to agents and people in the entertainment business who say, they know other people in the industry who have a massive problem and they just keep taking the 20%. And it's like, he said, my agent said, it's the first time I feel guilty about what I do for a living. I was like, good. And his journalists were saying, I feel a bit bad about what I did. Good. And we did. We all did take part. And there is a point when the mirror does turn back to the audience, because we all looked at that stuff and shared it and commented and thought, God, I'm so clever. I wrote that funny, witty comment on Twitter.
Also fascinating about our complicity in all that, some of the most arresting scenes, in my opinion, are all those cameras flashing, the paparazzi. And it occurred to me, it's fans fueling this thing. It's not even people that want to see her demise. It's fans.
Well, because all of those pictures keep getting clicked on. Yeah, exactly. We keep asking for more and more and more. And she kept delivering it, sadly, because she'd be walking down the street and she kept giving them something. She kept giving the photographers something. And those pictures sold papers. They sold newspapers. They gave us clicks. You know, the most popular websites are the gossipy ones. The best-selling newspapers are the tabloidy ones.
Was it conflicting for you at all to rely on some of this same footage?
Yeah, it was a kind of a question I was very aware of very early on. But I thought my job as a director is to tell the story with all of the tools at hand to make the bigger point. And if I don't use the footage, do I make the point as well? I could have someone say, well, you know, it's really terrible what the tabloids did to her. They took photos. Thinking, you're right. Well, tell me what I don't know. The thing about the film is you have to make it feel like this is visceral, this is violent, this is horrible. Do you want to be in that situation? I wouldn't want to be in that situation. So the whole role of a director is to make it feel cinematic and as if you're in there. I mean, there is a bigger arc as well. The film really begins, there's a recurring thing of point of view. When you do a drama, the one thing you don't do is look in the lens. You don't look in the camera. Okay, when you do a documentary, you can play with the tools slightly differently. What happened with this footage is that the earliest material is Amy with her best friends, birthday party, sings into the camera. Photographs of your friends, where do you look? You look straight in the camera. Nick gets a camera, her first manager's interviewing her, talking to her. She's looking straight at him, looking at the camera, looking at us, which is always looking at the audience. Later on, she takes the camera and films herself, singing to herself, looking at us. Her husband gets a camera, talks to her, you know, he makes out with her, making almost with the camera. It continues, she's performing. Later on, it becomes darker and darker. The paparazzi, we're now taking pictures of her. In fact, at one point, she attacks the camera. She's attacking the audience, you know. So this theme runs through it. So for me, that was like a continuation of the style of how the camera goes from being her friend to being quite violent and aggressive. And so it became a part of the style of directing the film.
There's also an interesting issue of detachment there, especially when you get into the late-night comedy jokes, as you mentioned, or the clever little quips online.
Cheapest gag was an Amy Winehouse gag. It was like, you know, stone home run.
What is it about us that makes us able to detach from humanity when these people are at a certain level of celebrity? We can't do it from someone right in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but you just realize that it was so easy. Because in a way, she didn't answer back.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the problem was that kind of humanity of the girl. She was a kid. She was very young. Was never there. It was like, because no one ever saw that girl. No one ever heard her speak, really. She didn't give interviews. You know, what was interesting is I did this previous film, Senna, where the lead character, Ayrton Senna, gave amazing interviews throughout his life. Like one question, 45 minutes he's talking. It's like so much material and he was so eloquent. Amy, after Back to Black came out, did not speak. And we did a lot of research. There's hardly any interviews that she gave when she became really famous. So she's not answering back. She's not defending herself. And sadly, there's very little of the team defending her. You know, you'd have thought, if you're that successful, you'd have a team of people outside your front door so you can get from your door to your car without having to push the journalists and the photographers out of the way yourself when you're a tiny little frail girl. But she didn't. I don't understand. And then it's only late in the day, the first segment you played, where Andrew and a particular team of security guards came in and protected her and kind of gave her a bit of a actually pseudo-family they became.
Was she always a private person, in your view?
I don't know. Amy is kind of almost the opposite. People would say her door was always open. She'd let anyone in. People would just move in. People would just come in and take stuff. She was not really interested in money and material things. So from the people I'd spoken to, you know, they'd be in the house going, who is this guy? Oh, well, you know, he didn't have someone to sleep, so they just moved in. And there was a lot of that. There were a lot of people who kind of took from her, let's be honest, that kind of hung out rent-free for a while and her friends or whatever. But, you know, there were other people that just passed through and yeah, she was kind of open, actually, in the other way. By the end, she became a bit of a recluse.
She passed away just before kind of the tipping point of this digital age of sharing all these images and stuff like that. How do you think she'd feel about this footage being out there?
I think, you know, she was on Twitter, she was on Facebook, she was kind of a part of it. She used it. She was a young person who used all of that technology. I don't know if she'd ever had an issue with that.
Amy Winehouse is definitely not the first celebrity to succumb to addiction. Do you think all the suffering she endured was part of what made her music so great to begin with? Certainly in her lyrics, as you showcase in this film, right? Yeah,
sadly. I mean, there does seem to be, you know, it's a recurring theme, isn't it? Kind of the most interesting, I suppose it's drama. You know, who goes to see those films about really nice people having a great time? You know, the music comes from tension or drama or conflict. You know, all that is what story is about. Historically, every story has to happen, And so songwriting is storytelling. And it's oral storytelling. It's as old as anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
And something has to happen for you to feel it. And I guess there is the odd song called Happy.
They're so rare, though.
They're not often, yeah. It's true. So
a good happy
that's
song,
the exception.
Yeah.
Amy was dark, though. I think Amy did have a kind of darkness to her, and that her lyrics are dark and the story is dark. And that's the thing. It sounded like a dance track and happy, but it's not. There's a lot more going on. It's much more complex.
Do you think it's possible to have fame without suffering?
Of course, there must be. There must be a way to be famous and not have to suffer.
But how many times do we see the story like we see in this film where she's getting her Grammy and she's miserable or bored? You know, I just feel like this is so recurring, right?
How have you seen it? Where else have you seen that?
I remember seeing a documentary about Carl Lewis winning his gold medals and he was depressed. Or I don't know. To me, it seems like
I don't know. I think that maybe with sports people it's slightly different because it's like you push yourself to attain something, and then you're like, if you're a really supreme athlete, you have to almost say this is nothing because I've got to do it again and do it again, and you have a particular cycle. I think because sports people have a particular mentality. Really successful ones, the medal means nothing. It's worthless. Why? Because I've got to beat myself. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that kind of thing with Senna. His was all about, he wasn't racing anyone else. He was racing himself. And if I set a time, the next time has to be better than my own time because I'm so much better than everyone else. I don't even have to think about them, you know. And I guess Carl Lewis at his peak was a bit like that.
Yeah,
he's going to win 4 gold medals, but there must be something. I mean, we know that everyone's got something that they're hiding, and Carl's had issues and things like that. I think with musicians, I don't know, it's complicated. I'm sure there are people that are really happy out there. We just don't hear about it. I mean, a lot of musicians that are singer-songwriters, for example, they just they back out. You know, you write songs. If you're a great writer, the best thing you can do is write songs and let someone else sing it. So you don't have to go on and perform it. The money is in publishing.
That's best
the
case
money is in
scenario
writing.
For sure.
Yeah. So there are a lot of great people out there who go and mind their own business and have a great home and have a family. They lead a great life, but they write the songs for other people and no one knows anything about them. There are a few musicians. Nick Shymansky, I talked to a lot about this, and he said, you know, there are artists that Amy could have been like, and he said a person she could have been like if things had turned out another way, was someone like Shad. Shad just tours, she does her thing, she's huge, she has always been huge. No one knows a thing about her.
That's true.
And she's amazing, and she has been amazing forever. No one knows anything. Doesn't have to do press. Adele, never done a festival. Has her career, does what she wants to do, huge records. No one knows a thing about her.
You have to make those very deliberate, difficult choices, though, like they do to back away, right? And those people in your life.
Team.
Yeah. Asif, again, a very powerful film. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot.